The morning light poured through the glass walls of the dealership, making every polished hood shine like a mirror. The smell of leather and wax filled the air, blending with the hum of quiet conversations and the rhythmic footsteps of salespeople crisscrossing the floor. Customers leaned over hoods, peeked inside doors, and tapped dashboards as if testing out pieces of their future. But among them was a woman who wasn't there just to look at cars. Her name was Valerie Thompson, a 53-year-old woman with a calm but powerful presence. To the world outside, Valerie was known as the CEO of Thompson Motors, one of the fastest-growing dealership chains in the Midwest. What had started as her father's single small-town garage was now a multi-million-dollar business under her leadership. Years of perseverance, long hours, and grit had built her success, but today, she wasn't here to be the boss. Valerie had walked into her own dealership dressed down in simple clothes. She wore worn jeans, a gray sweatshirt, and comfortable sneakers. Her hair was tied in a no-fuss bun, and her handbag was the kind anyone might pick up from a discount store. She didn't want to be noticed as the woman who signed the paychecks. She wanted to see how her staff treated someone who appeared to be just another shopper. She had done this kind of undercover walkthrough before. It wasn't a game for her, it was about honesty. Valerie believed the company's real character showed not in the quarterly reports, but in how people treated strangers. Did customers feel welcome? Did staff respect everyone equally? That was what she wanted to see with her own eyes. At first, things went smoothly. A young salesman with a friendly smile greeted her when she stepped onto the showroom floor. "Morning, ma'am. Let me know if you need any help," he said warmly. Valerie gave a polite smile back. "Thanks. Just looking around for now." He nodded and stepped back, giving her space. She strolled through the rows, admiring a navy sedan, then a black truck with gleaming rims. She paused here and there, listening as other salespeople spoke to their customers. Some were patient and genuine. Others leaned heavily on memorized pitches. Valerie made mental notes. The atmosphere was exactly what she had hoped, professional, welcoming, alive with energy. But then, the tone of the room shifted. "What do you think you're doing?" The words, sharp and dismissive, came from a tall man standing a few feet away. Valerie turned. He looked to be in his late 40s, maybe 50, with silver hair cut neatly and a watch glinting on his wrist. His pressed shirt and polished shoes screamed confidence. His eyes, however, carried something colder. "Excuse me?" Valerie asked softly. "You shouldn't be touching that SUV," he snapped, nodding at the white vehicle she had just rested her hand on. "Do you even belong in here?" Valerie studied him for a second. She knew that tone. She had lived through it before. This wasn't curiosity, it was judgment. He wasn't asking because he thought she might be lost. He had already decided she didn't fit. "This is a dealership," Valerie replied evenly. "I was just looking." The man smirked. His laugh came out short and mocking. "Yeah, right. Look at you. You think you're buying something like this? Don't waste everybody's time." The air around them tightened. A couple near the front desk glanced over, whispering. 2 employees paused at their desks. Even the receptionist shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Valerie pulled her hand back from the SUV's handle. She felt the sting of his words, though her face stayed calm. It was a sting she knew too well, the kind that came when people decided who you were before you spoke more than a few words. "Sir," Valerie said, her voice firm but controlled, "you don't know me. And you don't know what I can or cannot afford." He let out a dismissive scoff. "Oh, please. I know what I see. People like you don't come in here to buy luxury cars. You're probably just killing time. Honestly, someone ought to show you the door." Valerie's chest tightened, but her resolve was steady. She had walked into boardrooms where men ignored her voice until it cost them to realize she was right. She had built this business through grit when banks wouldn't approve her loans. This moment, ugly as it was, wasn't new. But it still burned. An employee began walking toward them, face tense, sensing the heat of the moment. Before he could speak, the man raised his voice louder, as if rallying the room. "She doesn't belong here. Somebody ask her to leave so the rest of us can shop." The room fell into an uneasy hush. Customers shifted awkwardly. Staff froze. Valerie breathed deeply and stood taller. She could have ended this confrontation in a second by telling him the truth. That she was the CEO, that her family's name was on the building, that every single car in this showroom was under her authority. But she didn't. Not yet. Sometimes the most powerful way to teach was to let arrogance show its full face before unmasking the truth. "I'm not leaving," she said simply. The man's face darkened. He stepped closer, towering above her. "You should, before I call security myself. People like you don't." "People like me what?" Valerie cut in, her eyes locked on his. For the first time, he faltered. His certainty cracked. He hadn't expected her to meet him head-on. Around them, silence hung heavy. No one moved, no one spoke. Valerie didn't break eye contact. She wasn't just a woman in a sweatshirt. She was standing for every underestimated person who had been told they didn't belong. Inside her chest, the fire that had carried her through decades of bias and struggle burned steady. She had fought through bigger storms than this man. And before the day was done, he, and everyone else watching, would know exactly who she was. Because she wasn't just a customer. She was the woman who owned everything in sight. The man stood stiff, his jaw tight, his breath audible in the heavy silence that filled the showroom. Customers whispered among themselves, and a few exchanged uneasy glances. Some of the sales staff shifted awkwardly, unsure of how to step in. Finally, the young salesman who had greeted Valerie earlier hurried over. His name tag read Ethan Morales. He was in his mid-20s, eager but professional, and his face showed both confusion and discomfort as he looked between Valerie and the man. "Is everything all right here?" Ethan asked carefully. The man scoffed. "No, everything is not all right. This woman doesn't belong here. She's messing around with cars she clearly has no business looking at. I've been a customer at dealerships for years, and I know who's serious and who's not." Ethan blinked, taken aback by the man's tone. His eyes flickered to Valerie, who stood tall and calm, her expression unreadable. Something about her posture told Ethan she was not the kind of woman to be brushed aside. "With respect, sir," Ethan said gently, "anyone who walks into this dealership is welcome to look at our vehicles. That's our policy. If Ms." He glanced at Valerie as if waiting for a name. "Thompson," she supplied softly. "Valerie Thompson." "If Ms. Thompson is here," Ethan continued firmly, "then she has every right to be." The man shook his head in disbelief. "You don't get it, kid. She's not a buyer. Look at her. She doesn't belong in this showroom. People like me are the ones keeping businesses like this afloat." Valerie tilted her head slightly, her eyes narrowing just enough to show her focus. "People like you?" she repeated. "Yes," the man snapped. "Hard-working, successful people who can afford these cars." "Not," he stopped short, but the poison in his words had already spilled into the air. The silence deepened. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, clearly torn between stepping in further and not provoking the man. Other staff members exchanged uneasy looks but stayed rooted in place. Valerie could feel her heart beating steadily, the way it always did when she had to step into the storm. She had wanted to wait, to hold her truth until the moment was right. But as she looked around, at Ethan's nervous stance, at the watching customers, at the smugness still etched across the man's face, she knew the moment had come. She exhaled, then spoke clearly, her voice cutting through the thick air. "You think you know who I am. But let me tell you something. I'm not just a customer. I'm the CEO of this dealership. Every car on this floor belongs to my company. Every person working here reports up to me. And the name outside on that sign? That's my family's name. The words landed like a hammer. For a moment, the man's face froze, his mouth opening slightly as though he couldn't quite process what he'd heard. The showroom erupted into quiet murmurs. Employees exchanged wide-eyed glances. Customers leaned in, whispering. Ethan's jaw dropped for a second before he quickly straightened, pride flickering in his eyes. Valerie didn't waver. She stepped closer to the SUV, her presence commanding now, her voice steady and unshaken. So when you tell me I don't belong here, what you're really saying is that a black woman can't possibly be the one who built this place. That's what your words mean. And let me be clear, I didn't just build this business. I fought for it. I fought through banks that said no, competitors who said I couldn't, and doubters who laughed when I said this dealership would grow. And it did. Because I refused to let small minds define my future. The man's cheeks flushed red. He stammered, I didn't mean. Yes, you did, Valerie said firmly, her eyes locked on his. And you're not the first. But understand this, you will not belittle me in my own house. Not today. Not ever. The entire room was silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Ethan finally broke the stillness. Ms. Thompson, he said, his voice filled with newfound respect, I had no idea you were coming today, but I'm glad I was here to witness this. Valerie gave him a faint smile. You handled yourself well, Ethan. That matters more than you know. The man shifted uncomfortably, his arrogance draining out of him. I apologize, he muttered, though the words came out stiff, hollow. Valerie tilted her head slightly. An apology doesn't erase the damage, but it's a start. Next time you decide who belongs where, remember this moment. The man nodded quickly, his confidence completely shattered. Without another word, he turned and walked briskly toward the exit, his footsteps echoing through the showroom. As the doors shut behind him, a wave of energy rippled through the room. Customers clapped softly, a few nodding in Valerie's direction with admiration. Employees straightened, their pride swelling. Ethan beamed, clearly inspired. Valerie, however, didn't bask in the applause. She looked around the room and said gently, let this be a lesson for all of us. Respect has no price tag. Every single person who walks through those doors deserves dignity, whether they're here to buy a car or just to look. We don't judge people by appearances. Not in this dealership. Not in this company. Her words hung in the air, powerful and unforgettable. Later that day, Valerie gathered her staff in the conference room. She told them exactly what had happened, not to shame them, but to remind them of the values they carried. Our work isn't just about cars, she said. It's about trust. It's about treating people the right way, even when no one's watching. If we fail at that, we fail at everything. The employees listened with rapt attention, some with tears in their eyes. Ethan spoke up, his voice full of conviction. I'll never forget what I saw today, Ms. Thompson. You showed me what leadership really looks like. Valerie smiled softly, her heart warmed. Leadership isn't about standing above people. It's about standing with them. Remember that. News of the incident spread far beyond the walls of the dealership. A customer who had been present recorded part of the confrontation on their phone, and within days, the video went viral. People across the country shared Valerie's words, praising her for her grace and strength in the face of prejudice. She received messages from women who said her story gave them courage, from young entrepreneurs who said they felt seen, from ordinary people who said they'd never forget the lesson. For Valerie, it wasn't about the attention. It was about the truth. She hadn't chosen to be underestimated that morning, but she had chosen how to respond. And in doing so, she reminded everyone watching that appearances don't define worth, and that true power comes from standing firm in who you are. That night, when the dealership lights dimmed and the last customer left, Valerie walked the showroom floor one more time. She ran her hand gently along the hood of the SUV that had started it all. She smiled faintly to herself, not out of pride, but out of gratitude, for the journey, for the fight, and for the chance to prove once again that she belonged everywhere she chose to stand. And as she stepped outside into the cool night air, she whispered the words she had carried with her all her life: never let anyone tell you where you don't belong.